Okay, Rabbi said we're continuing in Seif Shoneh Halachos, Siman Ches, Halacha, Lamed Beis. This is a maybe a sensitive topic, and that is how you should wear your tzitzis. What? Oh, yeah, here are the sheets, thank you. We're in Siman Ches, Halacha, Lamed Beis. The Mechaber tells us, Iker, I'm going to read to you the Mechaber in Siman Ches Sif Yud Aleph. Iker mitzvahs Talis Katan, the Iker mitzvah of Talis Katan, L'lavshay al begadav, is to wear it on your clothing. Kedei shetamid yarehu v'yizkar ha-mitzvahs, so that you'll always see it and remember the mitzvahs. Now he doesn't say the Iker mitzvah is to wear your tzitzis out. He says the Iker mitzvah is to wear the Talis Katan on the begadim, which really supports the idea we just mentioned from Rav Shalom Shachter, that the Chefza Shel Mitzvah is not only the strings, the Chefza Shel Mitzvah is the garment. You hear the Lashon of the Mechaber? Iker mitzvahs Talis Katan lelavshay al begadav kedei shetamid yarehu v'yizkar ha-mitzvahs. That's what Hasidim do. Hasidim wear their Talis Katan on their garment. So how do we explain what we do? What we do is based on the Arizal. The Arizal says not to show your beged. The Ari writes not to show your beged. What's interesting is, usually, if there would be a machlokes Mechaber and the Ari, so the Mekubalim would follow the Ari, and let's say Rav Moshe and Rav Ovadia Yosef would follow the Mechaber. But when it comes to Hanhagas Adam Ba'boiker, the Arizal is given very strong prominence. So, for example, the Mishnah Berurah brings the ksavim, meaning the kisvei ari. He says talis katan should be under your garments. And the Bir Halach and Siman Yud Sivches says our minhag is to wear talis katan under the begadim. Chazon Ish, by the way, wore it on his begadim. But the Mishnah Berurah brings that our minhag is we follow what the Ari says, not like the Mechaber. So look, Iker mitzvahs talis katan lav shal begadim k'shay shetamid yarehu v'yizkar mitzvahs uveksavim isa. In the writings of the Ari, we find talis katan tachas begadav. Mihu, however, al kalpanim tzarich sheyehei hatzitzis mi bachutz. The strings need to be out. V'loi ka'oisan shetoichvin oisan behaknafais. Not like those who put it in the corners of their garment. Now, what does that mean, the corners of their garment? It means like this. You know how in the corner of the garment, here, you have a double pocket? So these are tzemer, these are wool. You have a corner of the garment, it's like doubled, so they'll make a slit in the corner, and they'll tuck the string into that. So the Mechaber, the Mishnah Berurah says, no, not to do that. Not to do that. Why? Because you're supposed to see the tzitzis. You're supposed to see the tzitzis. Now, ach ha'anoshim ha'holchem bein hagoyim, those people who go among the Gentiles, yotzin bezeh, they would be yotzei the mitzvah of tzitzis even if they can't see it. Umikal makoyim b'shas habracha, when you make the bracha, yiyu megulim, they should be uncovered. Kedei hiloch dalet amos, at least the amount of time it takes to walk 4 amos. As we mentioned, we don't make a bracha on talis katan. So somebody who lives among the goyim, technically speaking, if you live in America, let's say, you live among goyim, so you would be yotzei if the tzitzis are not out, and they wouldn't even have to be out for the bracha because you're not making a bracha on it. Now, I'll share with you 2 things. Number one, is that really legitimate that in America you don't have to wear your tzitzis out? First of all, you should know that in the yeshiva that I learned in Chafetz Chaim, they follow the practice of Slabotka. In Slabotka, they did not wear their tzitzis out. And they felt it was their main worldview was to promote gadlus ha'adam. Gadlus ha'adam, they would dress in what was called conservative elegant. And wearing the tzitzis out was considered messy, embarrassing. It soiled the prestigious look that they were aiming to go for. However, we're not living in Lithuania anymore. This is not Slobodka. And al pi halacha, the tzitzis should really be out. The halachic rationalization not to is you live among Goyim. So the question really is would there really be more anti-Semitism? I mean, there are thousands of Hasidim, they have tzitzis down to the floor. So you're wearing a yarmulke. So what you think it's going to cause anti-Semitism if they see some string sticking out? I mean, or they look at it like it's funny. The guy next to you, he's tattooed from his head to his toe. May roishay ve'ad kadkadai. May kadkadai ve'ad the tip of his toe. He has piercings in every part of his body. Ein boy misayim. There's not one part of his body that is not completely mutilated and discolored. You can't wear nice strings out. So I think it requires reevaluation whether this indeed would apply, that you live among Goyim and therefore you can't wear a tzitzis out. But one thing is for sure, okay? So this is talking about sticking them in the corner of the garment. However, now we're going to see that many people don't stick it in the corner. And we don't want to know exactly where these tzitzis are, shaking around inside your michnasayim. That's a bizayon. You cannot have tzitzis floating around. Now, one thing I want to share with you. The word michnasayim in Mishnah Berurah and in Halacha does not mean pants. It means underwear. Okay? So one thing's for sure. It is usher to have tzitzis in your underwear. Sorry I have to say it. It's an isser. You're not allowed to do that. Now, are you allowed to have it sticking around in your pants? I don't know how respectful that is. If you don't want to, so in Slobodka style yeshivas, they stick it out and then they back into the pocket. So this way you see it a little bit and it's also not messy. You get the best of both worlds. It's not disgraced. It's visible, but it's not, it's not messy. Halachically, really, the tzitzis should be out. It would be prohibited to stick them in the underwear. So, those people that put tzitzis in pants, in their underwear, not only are they ignoring that which the pasuk says, you should see them and remember the mitzvahs of Hashem. Oid mevazen heim es mitzvahs Hashem Yisrach. They are disgracing the mitzvahs of Hashem. Va'asidin heim litein es hadin. They are also destined to have to give an accounting of that. They say, well, we go among Gentiles. Okay. For that, it would be enough to stick it in the corner of the garment. So bottom line is, to stick in the underwear is asr. To have it floating around in your pants, I don't know what to tell you. You decide whether that's respectful for a chefza shel mitzvah. To have it in the corner of your garment, that would be okay. Als bizayon, the only issue you have to deal with is uri'isa ma'isai. Which, again, if you legitimately, if you're working in a profession where you have non-Jewish clients and they're going to be maybe uncomfortable or it's going to be embarrassing, so then you have this Mishnah Berurah who says that b'makom goyim, then it would not have to be out as long as it's not in the underwear. Now, the Mishnah Berurah says, if you had a gift from a king of flesh and blood, if King Charles came and he gave you a pin, let's say the King Charles came and gave you a special pin, you'd make sure to wear that pin on your lapel so that everybody could know. If you went to the army and you were a commander, you're coming into shul wearing the pin on your lapel. If you had a gift from a king where the name of the king was on it, you would adorn yourself before people, you would wear it always, you would proudly display it. All the more so for tzitzis, shemerames al shem melech malchei hamlachim hakadosh baruch hu. The tzitzis is literally a reference to Hashem's mitzvahs. Kama miskabed ha'adam hanoisei shmai alav. How honorable a person is who bears the name of Hashem. Va'amru chazal hazohir b'mitzvahs tzitzis zoiche v'roya pnei hashchina. Anyone who's careful in the mitzvah of tzitzis will merit to see the face of the Shekhinah. Umashma min haksuvim, it's mashma from the Psukim, I believe in Zechariah, the Hayehudim sheyisharu le'es kates, the Jews who will remain in the end of days, yiyu mitsuyanim b'mitzvah zu, will excel in the mitzvah of tzitzis. V'amr Chazal, kol hazohir b'mitzvah tzitzis, anyone who's careful in the mitzvah of tzitzis, zoiche umeshamshim loy, he will merit that they will serve him, shnei alafim ushmoina me'es avadim, 2,800 avadim. I would be happy with, let's say, 3. One of them could do copies. One of them could set up, I don't know. Maybe I could use more, but 2,800 would be very good. Now, what's the cheshbon of 2,800? The Pasuk in Navi says 10 members of all 70 nations will grab one corner of your garment. So you have 10 Chinese, 10, Japanese, 10 of all the 70 nations, that's 700, will grab one corner. And 700 times 4 is 2,800. And they'll be happy to do it. Yes, sir. Yes. That's... Okay. Now, here's an interesting thing I just saw this morning. And I think a lot of kids have this. Are you allowed... So now, most people today follow the minhag brought by the Be'er Halacha that we wear the Talis katan under the shirt. Are you allowed to wear a Talis katan directly on your flesh? So the Dirshu brings some Shalas Tshuva Siach Yitzchak. You should not put the beged shel mitzvah on guf aram. You could clarify. Well, I think this would depend on what we discussed in the earlier share, whether the beged is chefza shel mitzvah. If it's not a chefza shel mitzvah, why can't you wear it on your flesh? According to Rav Shalom Schechter, it would be a chefza shel mitzvah. Maybe you shouldn't wear it on your flesh. Furthermore, it's a zilzal that the body sweat goes onto beged shel mitzvah. Everybody knows that after a certain amount of time, you need to get new undershirts. Without getting into too much detail, certain areas become discolored. It wouldn't be nice for that to happen to tzitzis. Now, the Ari says you should wear it under your clothing, under some clothing, and over others. Now, here's the question. Undershirt tzitzis. You ever hear of such a thing? I think most kids today wear undershirt tzitzis, yeah? I think when I was a kid, we were Mekayim, the mitzvah of tzitzis. They did have different murals on it. You had you'd go to the lady, she would make designs on it. I don't think I wore too many of those. But today, back in the day, you could get your favorite superhero on the tzitzis. The problem is they're married people. They're 7 feet tall, and their talis katan goes up to here like a tie on them. They're still wearing the tzitzis they got in kindergarten. The tzitzis got to be at least 18 inches, perhaps l'chatchila 24. But the tzitzis are not like a nostalgia from nursery school. But back in the day, we didn't have undershirt tzitzis. We had an undershirt, and a tzitzis, and a shirt. But nowadays, I would say 99% of kids are wearing undershirt tzitzis. Yeah? Is that accurate? Because they're very convenient. Because you just throw them in the laundry. Reb Chaim Kanievsky says, and I have to look into this more, definitely adults should not wear undershirt tzitzis. Why? Because then it's a beged dedicated to... Why do people wear an undershirt? Why do you wear an undershirt? For layers? It's to absorb sweat. Because that undershirt that you dispose of, that's discolored, you don't want your shirt looking like that. So it's protecting your clothing. Is a garment dedicated to absorb sweat chayiv in tzitzis? It's not a beged. It's not a beged l'levisha. It's a beged to absorb sweat. Reb Chaim says he's mesupik whether it's chayiv in tzitzis. So therefore he says you should not have undershirt tzitzis. Now would this apply even to a katan?
It's a problem for him to make a bracha.
So now there's a question: could you give a katan an esrog that he doesn't own? It's a question. In other words, for a katan, it might be okay because anyway, he's not really chayiv in the mitzvah. You're just training him. Yeah, but you're training him to do it in a way that if he would be a gadol, he wouldn't necessarily be yotzei this way. Reb Chaim Kanievsky says you should be zahir not to use undershirt tzitzis, unless you'll say for a katan, the undershirt is not really to absorb sweat. Do katanim sweat like that? What? Not like adults. But why do they wear an undershirt? Because they get, they get a little, the smell is not always roses, So Reb Chaim Kanievsky says, Nachan lizar milasis kain. I'm not sure, I don't know enough about this. Reb Chaim Kanievsky says better not to use it, and maybe we'll look into that more, whether there are other shitas that undershirt tzitzis are okay. What about the net tzitzis, the net tzitzis? I have no idea. I guess if you go fishing, it's good to have it on you just in case you need a net to catch fish. Would that work for tzitzis? I don't know. Do people wear those things? You go to camp, and only in camp you know what's going on. People using, because you never know. Maybe for sakanas nefashis, you might end up in a forest, you might have to go fishing. Okay, we'll hold over here. Shkayach everyone. Hatzlacha.